The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Yes, coming to you in high fiber optic. It's Wednesday night, April 24th, 2024. It's 11 p.m. on the East Coast of the United States, 8 p.m. on the West Coast, 2 o'clock in the afternoon in the Sydney Opera House, and here in crime-ridden Northeast Minneapolis, Elon Omar's district, it's 10 p.m. Central Daylight Time. I am Jim Peters, and welcome to another edition of Jim Peters at Night, episode 111, if you've got your scorecards at home or your bingo cards or whatever the hell you got. Okay, so I gotta tell you this right off the top. You know, we take phone calls here, we take audio calls, we take video calls, all sorts of stuff. We're not taking audio phone calls tonight. Blog Talk Radio's down again. We are not broadcasting there, and they supply our telephone number. So you can't call in with your phone. Now, usually you can call in with your camera, and I encourage that. Except tonight we have a live guest, and I don't know if I want to put a lot of people on the screen because this is going to be kind of a intense conversation. But I do encourage you. We changed the banner down the bottom here. Please text in. If you have we're going to talk to Bruce Solheim tonight. If you have a question for him, please text it in at 408-458-5088 or a comment or whatever. You know, if you want to talk about the fact you lost your dog, I don't know, whatever. But I'm going to ask you not to call in with your camera tonight for that reason. Okay? All right. So yeah. So Bruce Solheim is our guest. He has his book is called We Are the Aliens. Remember, let me give you the entire title here. It's called We Are the Aliens, the Case of Alien Human Integration. That's what it's called. Now, Mr. Solheim is a college professor. He teaches at Citrus College in Glendora, California. He has been there for 26 years. He teaches history. He's been a veteran. He is a veteran. Matter of fact, I want to ask him about this. He's apparently a disabled veteran, but I don't know how. So I hope that's not too probing a question there. Whatever. And he's also said that most of his life he's been talking to, well, not aliens, one specific alien who's been communicating with him. That would be extraterrestrial aliens, not migrant border aliens. No, extraterrestrial aliens. He's also been a defense contractor, and I'm curious to see how that's going to. I read I read the latest book, We Are the Aliens, which just came out a few weeks ago, if I'm right. He's written, is it 12 books? Hold on, I wrote it down. He's written 11 books and 10 plays. That would be stage plays, 6 of which have been produced. So I read his latest book, and it wasn't really that clear on whether he. Do I know what I'm talking about? No, I don't. Why do you tune in? It's like Jesus, Dana Lash is way prettier than me. I don't know if you've noticed that. And so anyway, Bruce is our guest, and we're going to be talking to him in about 25 minutes. He's going to be coming on tomorrow night. Oh, all right. So for those of you, I've been hyping this for a couple of weeks. For those of you who are into the UFO stuff, between Bruce and our guest tomorrow, Kathleen Martin, you're gonna cream your pants. That's all I'll tell you right now. So Kathleen Martin is the niece of Betty Hill, of Betty and Barney Hill fame. They were the first, essentially, for lack of a better term, documented alien abduction in history in 1961 in New Hampshire. And the reason it was documented is, first of all, there was a lot of physical evidence that something went wrong, that something happened. And secondly, they were the very first people to ever be put under hypnosis, because the problem was this happened in 1961. They had partial conscious memory of what occurred, enough to scare the crap out of them. They started to wonder if they're going nuts. And they finally went to a psychologist, a guy named Benjamin Simon in Boston. And Simon he was a practitioner of regressive hypnotherapy, which had never been used for anything regarding UFOs in the past, and he didn't buy this one bit. He said, he thought this was all bunk, although it was obvious that his clients were in duress. So he said, "I'll hypnotize them to see if I can dig anything up here." They were both hypnotized separately. The stories were the same. They were abducted by extraterrestrials and taken on board a craft and had weird medical procedures performed on them. And then and we got to ask Kathleen about this because this is really important. Her friend, longtime UFO researcher Stanton Friedman, said this is a smoking gun of ufology, and I believe him. I also think that too. As they were supposedly leaving, being taken back to their car, Betty asked one of the ETs, "Where are you from?" And he said, "Come here, I'll show you." And they projected in space in a room a three-dimensional map in the air, a holographic map, basically. And he said, "Well, here's Earth here, and here's your sun, and we're from here." And he showed her. And so Benjamin Simon, when she was under hypnosis, Benjamin asked her, "Can you draw the map?" And she said, "Yeah, I can draw the map." And she drew the map. Well, that map, that was in 1965. That map got published in the book about an interrupted journey, about their ordeal, which they had no intention of publicizing at all. What happened was a secretary in Benjamin Simon's office uh, uh, tipped off the press, basically, one of the local Boston newspapers, and the whole thing blew up. They didn't want that at all. They didn't want any publicity. I mean, people. It's been hell now, and we're going to talk to Bruce about this in a few minutes. Even in 2024, people think you're nuts if you're talking about this. 1961, it was crazy town. So nobody wanted this. Amazingly, their personal reputations did recover, even though this was, and I think partly that was because this is this is kind of so solid. There's, like I also said, there's physical evidence that something happened to their car. There was weird film and stuff on Betty's dress, which was torn for no reason. Uh, anyway, a woman named Marjorie Fish saw this map in this book, and she's a high school science teacher and a budding astronomer. And she said, "Well, I'm going to find this place." And it took her 2 years, but she did. She found it. And this is I think in 2006, I think, that she started this. So this is well after that. And it's the Zeti Reticuli star complex, which is 37 light years from Earth. And it's a star complex. It's not a solar system because it's two suns that revolve around each other. And each one of those suns has a solar system. It's a very, very odd and unusual thing. So Fish found this, but the really weird thing, and the thing that Stan Freeman keeps getting back to over and over again, is that in 1965, nobody knew that the Zeti Reticuli star complex existed. We did not have telescopes that could see that far, apparently, but it wasn't found or something. I mean, by 2006, it was a known quantity. But in 1965, no, nobody knew about it. So you're basically uh, Friedman's um, declaration is that, so you're going to say that either uh, one single suburban housewife who knew nothing about astronomy was the only person on their planet who knew where Zeta Reticuli was, or she's telling the truth. Those are basically your only two, um, you know, alternatives under those circumstances. So we're going to talk to her tomorrow. That's going to be really cool. I want to thank her for coming on in advance because yeah, it's like we get some pretty good guests here, and Bruce is no slouch either. So Bruce's story, I'll be perfectly blunt. It's fantastical. So you know, hold on to your seats. You might not buy all of this, but he's a very earnest man, and he's very accomplished, and he's very obviously not stupid. So there's more and more people like Bruce coming forward and saying, really weird things have been happening to me, and who are very, very solid, upstanding, and contributing citizens. And I think the reason they're coming forward is because more and more things are actually happening. So we're going to talk to Bruce. Bruce does talk about this in his book too, about some of the stuff that's been going on at the Pentagon and the RO project or whatever, and even in his book, he even writes about Sean Kirkpatrick, who recently quit. And I gotta want to ask him about that too. His book is very current. I mean, I think it came out 2 weeks ago, and it's like he must have been updating it to the very, very last minute. Well, I know there's a section where he talks about his diary. I think the last entry was March 25th of this year. So I mean the book. I mean, he finished the book less than a month ago, and it's already out. So, any rate, we take Fridays off here. Monday, we got our month in review panel. We do this once a month, the last Monday of every month. It's Don Zorro, Tim Conaway, and Larry Newman. They come on, and two of the four old guys, that would be me too included, shoot the shit, and we get things done, and we tell you what's wrong with the world, like you need to know. We're taking Tuesday and Thursday off next week. Yeah, I know. Yeah, yeah. Tell me about You call in the complaints. What can I tell you? On Wednesday, Jeff Meyer will be joining us for his monthly uh, um, soiree into our little uh, scan of bullshit here. He's a publisher and CEO of Conk News, and he is they're our sponsor. And before I forget this, I got a terrible thing that I got to tell Jeff about this. And if you're watching, I'm sorry, Jeff. Uh, I did not do the Conk commercial last night, so I'm going to do it now. This is the Conk front page in real time at conk.com. That's CONK.com. Conk is a news aggregator. It goes out, it gets news from 75 different sources, and every 3 hours, their servers go out to those sources, grab the news, come back, and chronologically lay it out on the front page of the Conk website. And there's you see the menu here. There's other things on the Conk website, but it's mostly a one-page website, and you don't have to register, and it's free. Got that? You don't have to do any. All you have to do is go there. So the thing is, so it takes all those stories and then lays them on in chronological order, regardless of where they're from. So you got all sorts of stuff mixed up in here. I can tell by looking at the little. I don't know if you can see. There's a little on the bottom left-hand corner of every story. There's a little icon, and that icon is the logo of the website they're getting the news from. Like for in the middle gutter, that's 100% said fedup.com. And I think, if I'm right, if I say this correctly, in the left-hand gutter, the very first story is from National Review, I think. I can't quite tell. Any rate, yeah, if you're a news junkie, you can't do better than this. I keep saying that, but it's really true. I look at this all the time. I get ideas for stories and talking points from this website, and you will too. And the thing is, so it all updates every 3 hours. You can come back. You can come at 10 o'clock in the morning. There's about the stories, the headlines, and the photos are from the actual articles. The headlines are not rewritten. They're the headlines of the story. And if you click through, you go directly to that article. There's no interstitial pages. You don't have to go to the front page of the website, nothing. It's basically a giant condensed aggregated newspaper. And so, like I said, it updates every 3 hours. You can go there at 10 o'clock. You can spend 2, 3 hours just reading the front page, what's on the front page. I don't mean, just itself, but if you click through to some stories, you can spend 2, 3 hours burning up some time reading this. You can come back at, 4 or 5 hours later, and 80% of the stories have changed. And the ones that haven't changed are pushed to the bottom of the page. So and then you can start all over again. So if you're looking for a time killer, man, holy shit, this is it. But you'll be informed, unlike the kids who are protesting the Israeli-Hamas war who don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And you can be informed. So, and there's no, I'll tell you, there's no weird far left websites involved in this. It's either center or center right. Uh, you can't do better. That's conk.com, conk.com. So hopefully I made up for that a little bit. Hopefully. All right. So Bruce will be joining us about 15 minutes. Here's what we got going on here. Uh, we got it going on. Of course, we always do. I referenced the stupid campus kids who are out protesting everywhere because they are Hamas. Queers for Palestine. Rah. Yeah. Shit. Fuck. What? What? I mentioned this last night, but it's getting really worse. So I heard a clip on Joe Pagg's radio show this afternoon, and he said it was recorded by somebody from Rudy Giuliani's podcast, and I think they went to Columbia University and stuck a microphone in the faces of two of the protesters, and basically they said, "We don't know what we're protesting. We don't know why we're doing this, but apparently it's a lot of fun." One guy said, he literally said, "I really wish I was better informed." Yeah, yeah, I do too, buddy. Good for you. That's great. And of course, the people have asked the president of Colombia to step down because she drew a line in the sand last night, and the protesters crossed over the line, and she did nothing. So, so basically, it's Barack Obama all over again. It's like, what the hell? What It's just I mean, it's unbelievable. They literally don't know what they're protesting. And I said this last night, we didn't have a guest last night. I talked for 90 minutes nonstop because that's what I do. I talk. But it's really true. You y- you um how do I put this? You can't, oh Jesus. Man. Oh, by the way, my hair looks pretty nice, doesn't it? I took a shower. These all right. These kids, they oh, fuck. God almighty, I can't think to save my life. Like, Jesus. Uh, well, the NYPD, in terms of, Columbia University uh, is in New York City, and the NYPD says that the students aren't driving the protest there or anywhere that they can tell in town, and so by extension, they're alluding to the fact that they don't think the actual kids are driving the protests anywhere. Now, Hamas came out, actually, I mean, real Hamas in Palestine, in Gaza, came out yesterday and thanked the protesters for supporting them. That's really great. Queers for Palestine. You know what happens if you're queer in Palestine? You get thrown off a building. That's what happens. See, this is what I don't understand. These kids do not know what they're protesting. And the real hilarious thing is if they were there, for example, Queers for Palestine. Israel is probably the most gay friendly country in the entire world, even more gay friendly than the United States. Uh, Tel Aviv is arguably the most gay friendly city on the planet, and yet these kids are supporting Palestine, where if you're gay in Palestine, you get thrown off the roof of the building to get killed. I mean, it's mind-bogglingly stupid. It's like, what the hell are you doing? And so, and one of the kids said, no, I shouldn't say that. Carrie Lock, I think her name is Lockby, who is Joe Pagg's newsreader. She said that she had lunch with her son yesterday, and the thing is, and those of us who are like me, a million years old, or actually anybody, if you're over 30, you have to maybe be reminded of this, that her son and his friends get all of their news off of social media, all of it. They don't read any newspapers, quote unquote news websites. They don't tune into any shows like this or anything, maybe Joe Rogan. And, I gotta, uh, I'm just an aside on Joe Rogan. He's fantastic, but I don't get the thing. He just did an interview with Tucker Carlson. The interview's 3 hours long, and I'm sorry, I don't care how interesting you are. I At this point, I wouldn't have sex with Cindy Crawford for 3 hours. I won't That's just too long to do anything. It's I don't I don't get, you know? But anyway, I mean, other than, the occasional podcast, these kids get all of their news from social media. And so what's happened? Well, Facebook has announced that basically they're gonna stop, printing the news or the news feeds. I mean, the actual, real news. They're gonna stop it because they're tired. They say they've tired of being dragged into this controversy about what's misinformation or not. I might counter that maybe it's because all the news on the left is all of a sudden bad. You know? Zuckerberg put up $500 million of his own personal money, to quote unquote "assist" in the 2020 election. And what kind of assistance that was. We'll go to the nursing homes and we'll take all the ballots. And man, if you can't fill your ballot out, we'll fill it out for you. That sounds good, doesn't it? Yeah. So now, okay, they've burned through that, and now they have nothing to say about good to say about their chosen candidate. Nothing. I mean, everyone knows this is a disaster, and so we'll just, we'll do nothing this time. That sounds good, doesn't it? Meanwhile, Trump is in court every damn day, 4 days a week, and his poll numbers are still going up. It's really amazing. There's a good possibility. There's only two possible realistic outcomes here on that court case. Either he will be found guilty or it will be a mistrial. There's virtually no chance he'll be found innocent. That you're not going to get New York, Manhattan is the single most liberal city in the United States. You're not going to get 12 Manhattanites to say Donald Trump is innocent. It won't happen. And so I was reading today, and I can't remember, was it Alan Dershowitz who said that realistically, if assuming Trump is convicted, he probably, based on other stuff that this, he probably would be fined and sentenced to some house arrest. In other words, he won't go to prison, he won't even go to jail, but he won't be able to leave the house for like several months. That's probably what will happen. So I don't know. Who knows? God, it's just like the whole thing's. I mean, it's like a banana republic. It's unbelievable the crap we got going on. Meanwhile, locally, uh, at the University of Minnesota, we're only about maybe 1 mile from this heart of campus, and there's Northrop Mall, which is the heart of campus at the University of Minnesota, which is this. Depending how you want to slice and dice it, the first or second biggest campus in the United States. We're constantly going back and forth with the University of Michigan. There's about 80,000 undergrad students there at the University of Minnesota. So yeah, it's a huge place. And so a bunch of students tried to set up a Free Palestine camp on Northrop Mall, and the university has a very strict policy of you can protest on the mall, but you can't put up anything even remotely permanent. So no tents. So the campus police came, and I guess they dragged the Minneapolis police with them. Came in 6 o'clock in the morning and told these kids, "You have an hour to get rid of these tents, or we're going to haul you to jail." Most of the kids left. 8 of them ended up in jail, but that dispersed the whole thing. So we kind of took care of, and that actually surprises me. This is a pretty damn. This is the heart of Elon Omar's district, and you know her; she's crazy. So there's a whole bunch of people running against her here because everybody in town thinks she's crazy too. So there's a guy, I think the guy's name is the Dean Samuels, who barely lost to her last time. No, she's a Democrat. You have to understand, this is such a liberal district. A Republican is never going to be elected. So you choose your flavor of Democrat. But he almost won. I think he lost by only a few thousand votes. And now there's 3 or 4 more challengers. So, it'll be really interesting to see what happens. Of course, now this isn't me talking about this. This is the Star Tribune, the local, regional newspaper in Minneapolis, has accused her of paying people to vote for her, especially from the Somali community. $200, I guess. And so if you're at least inclined to watch this show at all, here's my advice. Take take the $200 and vote for somebody else, okay? All right. Well, Bruce, Bruce Solheim's here, so we're gonna put him on, and I'm going to play some 12 seconds of bumper music and push a bunch of buttons. Here we go. Hey, Bruce, how you doing?
Good. How are you, Jim?
Good. You're coming in loud and clear. That's good. And I got a nice
Awesome.
voice.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Where are you right now? May I ask?
Glendora, California.
Yeah, it's a very nice place, actually.
Yeah,
One of those
I like
places in Southern California that kind of people don't know about, but it's still like wonderful. Because
it. It is.
yeah, yeah,
It's a small town, but it's yeah, I mean, not far away from everything. So,
yeah. So I got a million questions here. I
yeah.
read your book. Your book is called "We Are the Aliens: A Case
Mhm.
of Alien-Human Integration."
Mhm.
Uh, you are a professor at Citrus College. You've been there for 26 years. You've published 11 books. You're a Fulbright scholar, pretty impressive. You were an aviator for the U.S. Army. And do you mind if I ask, you were disabled? May I ask how? Is that out of bounds or?
I am there's numerous different things, conditions caused by my service, and not so much the aviation services. Before that, I was an enlisted man and I worked in a prison, a military prison, and I was injured while working in the military prison.
Uh-huh.
So it was a terrible job. I also worked in a maximum security prison for a while in the state of Minnesota.
Oh, well,
So
that's where we're from. We're here in Minneapolis.
Okay. Yeah, I lived in Northeast Minneapolis. I worked at Oak Park Heights
We're in Northeast Minneapolis.
on, oh god, what was it? Lowry Avenue? Lowry
Yeah,
Avenue?
Lowry. Yeah,
Lowry
right.
Avenue, yeah.
Yeah, we're about
949. I still remember 949 Lowry Avenue. Yeah, I
yeah,
think that was
yeah,
it.
that's about, just a few blocks from here, actually. Yeah,
Oh, really? Wow,
yeah.
isn't that a
We're at
small
Broadway and
world?
Central, so,
Oh, okay. All right.
yeah. So I have to ask you before we start here, are
Mhm.
you under any clearances or any security oaths because of your, time in the military?
No, no, I never signed any NDAs. I mean, I did get secret briefings. That was a
Yeah.
long time ago, but I'm not gonna be talking about any of that stuff, so
Well, that's what I wanted to know. So
yeah, yeah.
I also wanna know if there's anything you couldn't talk about because of that too. So
N No, no, there I can talk about yeah, I'm not gonna no, I can talk about anything.
and you've also worked as a defense contractor.
Yeah, I worked for Boeing. I was on the B-1 bomber project, and I started on the B-2. And then I switched to Boeing commercial, which was a big mistake. I should have stayed with Boeing military airplanes. I enjoyed that more than Boeing commercial. Of course, Boeing's not doing so well right now. They're
No,
having a
yeah.
lot of trouble.
Did you just find working on the military stuff more interesting?
The pace was slower. It was steadier. It was something I was familiar with because of my 6 years, well, 8 years if you can consider the reserves as well. So I was just something I was used to. I was used to that military. It was a nice transition going from the
Yeah.
military into Boeing military airplanes. And commercial was a different animal. I mean, it's you ramp up really quick and then you fire everybody and then you ramp up again. It was a roller coaster and it was cutthroat and it's just I didn't like it. I really didn't like it.
Did you, in terms of working, for Boeing, did you ever find out anything, especially on the military side, regarding the ET situation? Did any of that stuff ever come up?
No, no, I didn't, but I did learn a lot about how FARs and DARs work. The defense acquisition regulations, federal acquisition regulations, and I did learn that when Jimmy Carter, I've looked at the documents, and when Jimmy Carter canceled the B-1A, Boeing kept going with their own money because they knew Reagan was going to be elected and they're a very conservative company for the most part, and they kept going, knowing that it would get turned back on, and it did, and it became the B-1B bomber, which is what
Huh.
I worked on. And I saw the documents. I mean, all the procurement documents. I was, when things were kept in giant file cabinets. I was going
Yeah,
through those things all the time. So I always thought that was really interesting. I learned a lot
it is
uh,
interesting. I'm
about
glad you
how that.
brought that up. That's
Yeah,
actually pretty cool. Yeah.
yeah.
So tell us a little about your personal life story. You are a first generation American, right?
Yes, that's correct. My parents are from northern Norway, from an island 200 miles above the Arctic Circle, and they came over after World War II, 1948. Uh, they lost my their first child. My eldest brother died during the war, during Nazi occupation, because the Germans took all the medicine and he didn't get adequate medicine. He died at 2 years old. But then my sister was born in Norway, and then in '48 they came to Seattle, where we already had some older generation relatives living. And my dad was a fisherman and a carpenter, like so many other Norwegians. My mom worked as a maid in a rich person's home and worked in factory for a while. And so that's how they made a living. They both had about 6 years of formal education. And I was the first one in my family to go to college. My brother was in the Vietnam War, and he was a high school graduate. And my sister was a high school graduate and worked for Northwest Airlines, actually.
Where did
So
you live?
I lived in the north end of Seattle in a place called Kenmore. It was
That's where your family first moved from Europe?
they moved to Ballard, which is the Norwegian part of Seattle,
Uh-huh.
and that's where they lived until they bought a house and property in Kenmore. And I was born when they lived in Kenmore, so that's where I grew up. It was very rural then. Now it's cold, total suburbs, but
Right.
it was a pretty idyllic childhood growing up there. And
Did
I
you
took my
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, and I took my first trip to Norway when I was 4 years old. We stayed there for about 9 months, and so that was the first trip. I've had many trips since then back
I
to
wouldn't
Norway.
normally bring this up, Bruce, but
Hmm.
I also am a first generation American, and my family's from Eastern Europe, and
Oh,
I also went over to Europe when I was 4 years old.
ah,
I spent 3 summers as an adolescent, and the entire summer, 3 months
hmm,
there. And the reason I'm bringing this up now is because those 3 summers I spent in Europe as a small child
hmm.
basically really changed or ended up contributing my worldview. Did you find that at the time?
Well, certainly. I mean, I forgot all my English. I was 5 years old, and when I came back to go to kindergarten, I didn't speak English anymore.
Well, I was going to ask you that too. Was Norwegian actually your first language? Did you use that?
I, I always tell my wife it was because that's what my parents spoke in the house. So,
Right.
and then when we went to Norway, I did speak English with my little friends before we left, but when I was 4. But then when I came back, I had forgotten all my English, and I had to relearn it. And but my parents spoke both languages and mostly Norwegian in the house. But the funny thing is, they wanted me to speak English to them because they didn't want me to have an accent. That's what they told me. So, and
Uh-huh.
I've heard a lot of immigrant first generation children, get that, where their parents say, "We'd like you to speak English to us. We're going to speak the old mother language to you, but you got to speak English to us." So, but I'm fluent in Norwegian, so it's
Did you ever have an accent? You obviously don't have one now.
uh, people who know me well say every once in a while I'll say something that sounds a little Norwegian, like I don't say yeah, I say yeah. Things, just little things. You'd have to, it's more subtle,
Yeah.
but yeah, there's certain things the way I say it.
So you're growing up in Washington State, and you have this idyllic childhood, and all of a sudden, what are entities showing up in your room, or what happened? How did you get
Well,
started on this whole thing? That's what I want to know.
yeah, yeah. Actually, it did start in Norway when I was 5 years old, but between 4 and 5, somewhere in there, right around 1962, 63. I'll just say 63. I had a healing experience, a very strange experience in my grandmother's home. I was very, very sick, and they thought I was going to die, and there was no hospital on this remote island. So I was in this little bed, and I was crying myself to sleep. I couldn't move. I couldn't move my head. I couldn't move my limbs. And I cried myself to sleep in this little bed in my grandmother's kitchen. And then I woke up and there was this bright light in the ceiling, and in the ceiling of her kitchen. Nobody was in the kitchen at the time, and I felt like everything was going to be okay, like I wasn't going to die. And
Uh-huh.
because we had cousins coming over saying, "Oh, this is what happened when so and so got polio," or what. There was all
Yeah.
these terrible stories, and I went back. I fell asleep. I felt fine, and then when I got up, my mom and my grandmother were there, and I jumped out of bed and I was running around and acting like I was fine, and I was. And I told my grandmother, my mom about it, and they said that was your guardian angel that healed you. It was a miracle. And I always accepted that's what it was, a guardian angel. I now know that it was a different kind of entity, but it was a healing experience nonetheless. And what it did is just opened the aperture for me. I just started having experiences after that, just randomly and frequently. Plus, my mom was very psychic, so it ran in the family. And we used to practice telepathy all the time with a regular deck of playing cards. Although my dad didn't like it, he would come in and catch us doing it, and he'd tell us to put them away. That's nonsense, you know.
Did you find that? Do you think you found it scary or?
I think it was the only thing he found scary. I mean, he was, a deadliest catch kind of fisherman in Alaska.
Yeah.
He was in a Nazi labor camp. He'd survived all that stuff, so he wasn't afraid of very much. He was a very brave man, but he did not like the paranormal. He didn't like any of that stuff. I think that was probably the only thing that probably did frighten him. So it made him kind of angry. And my mom would just, put the cards away and then wink at me.
So, I didn't really get this impression reading your book, but I'm listening to you here. Your life and mine are very, very much the same. My mother is still alive. She's gonna in 3 months she'll
Oh,
be 100 years old.
that's
She still
wonderful.
lives on her own, but she also has had uh, demonstrated psychic abilities throughout her life. My question regarding that is, do you think it has something to do with your heritage? Because my mother does.
I think yes, it's in the family. Her mother, my mom's mother, who I never got to meet because she died before I got there when I was 4. She died. She was an herbalist and a healer type person. My mom never used the word psychic with her mother, but I got the impression it was more than just the healing. But she had this
Well,
ability.
forgive me, Bruce. In 1962, did anyone even know what that was? I don't even know.
Well, this is northern Norway and was very isolated in those days, and the idea of a healer was very common. People, there's a lot of folklore and trolls and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's a remarkable place even still. It's like time has stood still on the island in many ways. I still have the home that my dad was born in. It's over 125 years old, and my cousins kind of maintain it. But yeah, so that was the first experience I had, and yeah, my mom. I remember I got in trouble in kindergarten because I talked about people, the playmates that I had who were imaginal. There was 2 of them. One was a boy my age I called Johnny, and the other was a grown man with dark hair, and his name was John. So John and Johnny, not very creative, right? But I would play with them when I was outside by myself. And I talked to my teacher about it in kindergarten, I remember, and I got in trouble because she said that you don't talk about things like that. It's not real. It's not real. So I'd go home and I'd tell my mom, and she'd say, I know they're real, but you have to know when to talk about this stuff. So she started to teach me kind of the rules of the road, with how to deal with psychic abilities and seeing things and so forth, that maybe other people don't or experience. And so I learned from her, and it was just kind of kind of like an apprenticeship, if you will. Now she was never a professional psychic,
Yeah.
but she was very psychic nonetheless, which also caused a little bit of a clash between us because we were very similar. She was very artistic. I was, very artistic. So and my dad was the practical guy, you know. So anyway, that's kind of my childhood, and I kept having these experiences. And at age 6, I had a remarkable experience there in Seattle, where we lived. We're in Kenmore, but it's, you know,
Yeah.
outside of Seattle, and the it was an ET experience, and it was an intervention to help me, because as it turned out, there was this horrible man that lived up above the hill from us, and he was a child molester, as it turned out. You know, nobody really knew it at the time, but
Uh-huh.
uh, I remember that sometimes I'd go up there and play with his children, and he would do these bizarre things that I knew were, it just didn't seem right. He acted like a kid, you know, and adults
Yeah.
are not supposed to act like kids. And you know, now I know what was up, and I've been told, you know, that he was arrested for that later on in life. But anyway, so the first intervention that I had experience with this ET, that I, other than the healing experience, that I remember, was him telling me I don't have to go there anymore, and just tell my mom that you know, even if they offer to babysit, don't go. And and I remember seeing this ET in my backyard, and him telling me this, and I said, why should I listen? Why should I listen to you? You look like a monster, you know, because he had the typical, you know, the upside down teardrop shaped head with the big eyes,
Tall
and
gray or small gray?
very tall.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I might look like a monster to you, but the real monster is in that house up there. So you don't have to go there anymore, and your mom will be fine with it. And also, I was able to, and it was other children too that he had warned. And he presented this hologram of a ship. That was the first time I ever saw a ship, what they, you know, a spaceship would look like. And but it was so traumatizing. The whole experience was so traumatizing that for 2 years after that, I had to go to speech therapy. I was so
Oh, hold it.
traumatized.
What was it, the seeing the ET, the child molester, or both?
I think it was a combination of the whole thing, you know, that
Uh-huh.
all this was possible, you know, and learning more about, you know, these abilities that I suppose that I had, you know, maybe that came from my mom or that lineage or whatever. And for 2 years, I struggled to speak. I would have such a stuttering problem that and I got teased so much, you know, relentlessly when you're a stutter. That's what happens. And I just stopped talking, and they sent me to speech therapy, thank goodness. And after 2 years, I was slowly able to develop the ability to speak without stuttering too much. And it's remarkable when I think about it that I talk for a living as a teacher. You know, I never would have thought that. You know, that's a
Well, Bruce, I went to speech therapy too, and I talk for a living. So,
yeah, I know, isn't it? It's
yeah,
yeah, we have a lot of synchronicities there. That's very interesting.
yeah,
A lot of
yeah, it is.
similarities.
I'm skipping ahead here,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
1,000 uh, steps.
Hmm.
So, you know, you were talking about the fact that at first you thought this was your guardian angel, and then you started thinking, well, no, maybe it's something else.
Yeah.
I talked to a lot of people on the show about various, you know, quote unquote paranormal things.
Hmm.
And what I've noticed is that there seems to be a lot of cross between, like, I'm talking about like after death experiences, or near death experiences,
Hmm.
and people and ET abduction. And I'm starting to wonder, and I know you wrote about this in your book. I read the whole
Hmm.
thing. I'm
Yeah,
starting
thank
to
you.
wonder if there's some sort of cross pollination here. It's either like you know, it's hard. It's almost hard to tell one from the other in a way. You know?
I agree. No, you're right. What I think, and it's not just me that thinks it, there's others that think this too, that the ET world where they operate, the spirit world where I have my, you know, I've seen ghosts and, you know, other
Yeah.
things, and the quantum world are all really the same thing. It's the same. They're operating in the same realm. What David Bohm, the American physicist, would call the implicate order. You know, the implicate reality,
Hmm.
the objective reality,
Yeah.
the way things really are, as opposed to what we're doing right now, which is the interface, you know, the everyday reality that we
Right.
are comfortable with, you know, that, but then we catch glimpses of it every once in a while, and of the implicate order or the objective reality, and that's what frightens people. And for other people, it's just a remarkable, cool experience. It's like they get deja vu, or they see a ghost, or they have an ET experience, or they see a UFO, or whatever, or any other number of paranormal things that could happen to them. But I think it's all operating in the same realm. That's kind of what I've come to believe. Yeah.
I have a theory here
Hmm.
that I presented. I think you're friends with Bruce
Yes.
Rapalano, right? I think
Yeah.
I was talking about this with him, about the
Hmm.
fact that I'm starting to think that, and I don't know about the spirit stuff, but when it comes to the ETs, it
Hmm.
seems like if you think about this, it seems like sometimes I'm starting to think that ET reveals itself to humans, specifically if those humans don't believe in them. In other way, you know what I mean? It's like
I
if you're accepting of it, it's not that big a deal. They don't bother. But they really, oh, like this guy thinks we're full of shit. Let's go see him. I don't know if there's something to that, but
I think there might be, and I also think that it's I think it's Whitley Strieber that said in his book, whichever, it was not the latest book, but the one before, said that he believes that they kind of identify you by this kind of glow. So from their implicate order, they see us in this explicate order, the regular reality, and they go, okay, that person we can connect with pretty easily, whether they believe in us or not. It doesn't matter, because there's something about them that makes it an easier target. It's
yeah,
like, what do they call it in spy terms, a targeted individual or whatever.
right,
Somebody that they can, because if there's people that say they don't believe in it, but yet they still have that ability to make that connection, they'll still go after those people because they know they can communicate with them. And it's the same with spirits. It's the same with those that have passed on. They're not going to waste their time with people that don't have the ability to make the connection, because it's quite an ordeal to make that connection, both for us to go up in our energy and for them to come down. I'm oversimplifying it, but
yeah.
anyway,
Oh,
but I think there is something to it, but I think the commonality there is, whether they believe in it or not, they have this innate ability to make that connection.
well, the only way you can talk about this stuff is by oversimplifying it. I mean,
Well, it's so
yeah.
complicated. I
Yes,
mean,
it is, and now I'm skipping ahead again, and
yeah.
I did not get this out of your book, so tell me what you think
Okay.
about this. Um, there's so, oh, Jesus, how do I put this? There's so much going on here. The question is, if this isn't reality, if our like you said, our interface life isn't reality, what is the point of it?
Yeah, that is a tremendous question. That's like an existential question.
Yeah,
Uh, I think that what we're experiencing now is preparation for what Anzar, who I connect with. Now, I know we haven't talked about him yet, but he's
yeah,
this entity. I'll call him an NHI because that's the not modern terminology, non-human intelligence.
right.
Anyway, he's been with me since childhood, and he tells me that we are in the process of making a leap of consciousness, not a leap of faith, but a leap of consciousness, which is like an evolutionary leap. So we are making that. This is kind of like the training grounds, and we're going to make that leap where we can go to that next higher level of evolution, of human evolution. And that's what we're going to be required to do. We're going to have to do it, because our technology is rising so much faster than our ability to deal with it morally, ethically, spiritually, or in any other way. AI is just the latest example, but there are other things like CRISPR technology. All this stuff is hitting us so fast, and yet we're lagging behind. And it's going to take a leap of consciousness to realize who we really are.
So
And
tell the audience here about your friend Ansar. So how did this
yeah,
come about? Who is he? Go ahead.
yeah, and okay, Ansar. It's an interesting story. Well, he's been with me since childhood, but I didn't realize that all the way. Yeah, it's only recently, actually, since 2016. So I'll
Oh,
start with you.
that's quite recent.
You know,
Oh, I didn't.
2016
Yeah.
is when I put things together. He's been with me the whole time, but I didn't quite understand it.
Did you
And what
think
happened?
did you think at some point he was more than one person or entity? I mean,
Yes, and I thought these some of them I thought were just paranormal experiences because I didn't
uh-huh.
really know. Like you said, it was hard to tell. But now I have a broader understanding, and because I have regular communication with him, I can go back and check all these things and say, "Was that you when this happened? Was that you when this happened?" And it's the answer. He always said, "Yes, yes, 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 yes." It's all,
Did he ever
yeah.
say no?
Uh, Not yet, not
Interesting.
yet.
Huh.
Yeah, so he's been kind of with me the whole time, but it's more than that. It's an integration. So, but anyway, in 2016, my friend Gene Thorkelson, he's Norwegian American too, Norwegian parents. We grew up together. He passed away, and a month after he passed away, I had a vision of him, and he came to me and spoke to me. And a vision just means that kind of like it's not like you and I are talking right now, but it's yeah, yeah, he's kind of a ghostly visage, right? But he's speaking to me. It's an intelligent conversation, and I asked him, I in kind of funny way, I said, "What's it like to be dead?" And he laughed, and he said, "If I was really dead, like you mean that, I wouldn't be talking to you, would I?" And I said, "Oh, you're right. Yeah, that's right, Gene." He was a funny guy. He was an actor, actually, so he's very animated. Um, and then I later I asked him. I said, "Well, what's it like? Where you're at?" And he said, "Well, it's the way I can describe it. There's no past, there's no future. It's just all happening right now. Everything's together, which is the way the quantum world really works.
Yeah.
That's the way he described it in his own way." And then later I asked him, Gene, who are the aliens anyway? I understood there were aliens, and I knew I had these experiences, but I wasn't quite sure. And he said, Bruce, we are the aliens. So he actually gave me the title of the book, but he also gave me the title for my other books, the Timeless trilogy. He when he described what it was like where he's at, he said it's timeless. It's just all happening at once. And so he's been with me too. I communicate with Gene and with Anzar, but it's at that point that I started doing these spirit walks, and I reconnected with Anzar in a more official way, so that we every week, once a week, I do a spirit walk. I talk to Anzar. Who's a non-human intelligence. He's originally. I asked him a lot of questions, and I keep coming up with new ones. But he's originally from the Orion system, so I've always been attracted to the Orion constellation. From the Rigel system within Orion. That's what he's told me. Uh, he's told me that an aspect of him is an aspect of me.
Yeah, I was
So
going to ask you about that if you don't mind
yeah,
stopping me for a second.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
at
yeah,
some point in your book, you did say that you came to the conclusion that you are Anzar. And I wanted to ask
yeah,
you exactly, did you
yeah,
mean that Anzar that you were Anzar's voice inside your own head, or that you were like related genetically or
yes.
spiritually? What exactly did you mean by that?
We are integrated. So we are connected through time, through space time. Actually, he's both in my future and in my past, and with me now. And it actually came about. I was I had to give my permission for that integration to fully take place, and that's where I came up with the subtitle, this idea of alien human integration, which is what it's going to take to make this leap of consciousness. And I think all of us have someone, whether it's Anzar or somebody else, and that is that integration that's going to help us make that leap of consciousness. And it's funny, but the only other person that's seen Anzar is a friend of mine named Lucy, and
Yeah.
Lucy's a shaman, and it was at a CIRO meeting, which is the Close Encounter Resource Organization headed by Yvonne Smith. I'm not sure if you've ever talked to Yvonne. She's been in the ufology community for like 35 years. She
Yeah.
studied with David
No,
Jacobs
I
and
haven't. No.
Yeah, she knew John Mack. She knew all these people, and she's been doing regressions for a long, hypnotic regressions for a long time with experiencers. And anyway, we're at this meeting, and I told Anzar, please come to the meeting. I want to see if anybody else can see you. And he said, okay. And he came and he was with me. I knew he was with me, but I didn't say anything to anybody. And then after the meeting was over, I said, listen, did anybody see anybody with me? I didn't say his name or anything. I just, did anybody see anybody with me or anything next to me? And everybody said, I don't know. And then this one, Lucy, looks up from her plate of French fries that she's eating and just kind of nonchalantly said, yeah, who's the big tall native dude behind you? And and he presented himself as this looking like a Native American, almost like a Kachina doll. And that's the picture that I have on the cover of the book. And I said, that's Anzar. That's Anzar. You see him? And she goes, yeah, I see him. And then like it was so nonchalant. It was funny. It was hilarious. And then she said, but I got something more to show you. And she took out her wallet and her driver's license, and on her driver's license was her address, and her address was Via de Anzar, the
Uh-huh.
way to Anzar.
Yeah.
And so that is just a remarkable thing that she's the only other person that I know of that's seen him.
Well,
And
hold it, Bruce, I gotta stop you. It
yeah.
wasn't clear from your book that you had ever actually physically seen him. If
Yeah.
you said that, I didn't catch it.
Yeah, that was in 1997 when I had a vision of him. And in the book, I think at the end of the book, I have some illustrations by different
Yeah,
artists.
you
And
do.
one of them is Anzar kind of in a proto-human look, and
Uh-huh.
he's revolving in space. And
Uh-huh.
he had a pretty big download communication with me in 1997. And I remember drawing the picture of him, writing down every word that I could remember from this download. And it was very Zen-like. It was, the experience. And I didn't share it with anybody until that was 1997. I shared it in 2001 with a colleague of mine here at Citrus College. She's since passed away tragically, but anyway, she was an anthropologist and she studied, ancient religions and stuff. So I thought, oh, she'd be a safe person to present, my picture and tell her the story of he. I didn't know his name was Anzar yet. I called him the progenitor because that's what he'd said his name was, the progenitor. And then I showed it to her and I read it to her and I showed her the picture and she looks at me and she goes, "You're a pretty spacey dude, aren't you?" And I didn't expect that. I thought she would go, "That's really cool. Tell me more about it." I thought it was going to be like an opening to an exchange of
Yeah,
I can talk to somebody about my whole life of paranormal experience. No, it
yeah.
was like a rejection. And this was the one person I thought I could talk to. I couldn't do it in Boeing. I couldn't do it in the military. I couldn't do it really in my academic life. I mean, it's kind of something you have to kind of keep to yourself if you want to keep your security clearance or your
Well,
job or
Lucy got
credibility.
it.
Lucy got it, yeah, and she did. And so anyway, then when I started doing the regular spirit walks, I said, okay, you're the progenitor, but what other name do you go by? That's when he said Anzar. So and then I found out I had just last year, I got an email from somebody who read the book, Anzar the Progenitor, which is the one before this, and the book before this. And he was in the Netherlands, and he's studies the Amazigh culture in Morocco, which are also called the Berbers, and they're an indigenous people there in Morocco. And he said, "Did you realize that Anzar's the rain god, the chief god, the rain god for the Amazigh?" And I said, "Well, I had read about that and also the connection to Iran." And he said, "Is that why you chose the name Anzar?" And I said, "I didn't choose the name Anzar. I didn't know anything about Morocco really, other than the whatever I learned from World War II history, because my field is modern U.S. history." And and he said, "Well, this is pretty remarkable because the Amazigh people that's who the ancient god they worship, and he's also has origins, not from the earth. This idea that he comes from, I think he said the Pleiades, which is close and kind of similar to the Rigel system in Orion, but not not the same. But anyway, that was pretty remarkable that this person just came out of the woodwork and told me that. So I wrote a little bit about that. I did a kind of a deep dive into Amazigh culture, and it was very interesting. So it's a powerful name in certain cultures, and I mean, I didn't make it up. That's what he told me his name was. And I asked him, I said, "Are you the rain god for the Amazigh?" And he said, "Well, yeah, it's one of the guises, one of the roles that I've played." And I said, "But you don't consider yourself a god, right? I mean, you're not telling me that you're no, I'm not a god." And I said, "Well, there is a God, right?" And I asked questions like, "There is a God, right?" And he said, "There's a creator, yes, the creator that created all of us, no matter who you are." And then the kind of the beginning of the book, I start with kind of a funny thing where I asked him, about being an alien, and he said, "Alien, who wants to be called an alien? Look it up." And I'd never really looked it up. I mean, I thought, it's just one of those words you use. You don't really look it up. But when you look up, all the definitions are all so negative. I mean, it's really negative. And I said, "Sure enough, yeah, nobody wants to be called an alien. You're right." And then I said, "Well, what do you want to be called?" And he said, "Star family." And then I thought, wow, that's what like indigenous people, like the Native Americans, the Aborigines, they all use that terminology, star people, star family. So I said, that's kind of cool. I think I'll try to do that, even though I still use the term alien.
Hey, I
And
was just thinking about this the other day. This is completely off topic, but you just touched on it right now. Indigenous people in the United States, we've had a lot of different tribes. I'm here in Minnesota. You've been here before.
yeah,
This is Native American Indian country.
yeah, yeah.
And I was thinking, the interesting thing about the Native Americans, uh, they were technologically, I'll just for bluntness here, they were technologically stupid. They were, I don't know if you've ever heard this, that like, for example, they put wheels on their children's toys, but it never occurred to them to put wheels on their own carts. They dragged them,
Okay.
right? But on
Yeah.
the other hand, so the Europeans come over, we have these guns, we have these machines,
Mhm.
and of course, because of that, might makes right, and we take over the whole place. But
Right.
in terms of spirituality, they were and still are eons ahead of us. It's a
Yes.
different type of intelligence. People, it's not
Yeah.
so much that people are smart or stupid, it's that they're smart in different ways.
Yeah.
I
No,
just,
you're exactly right, and Anzar talks about that with this leap of this leap of consciousness comes what he calls an era of reconversion. And I said, well, what I asked him, I said, what do you mean by it? Because sometimes he's very I can't understand what he's saying. And a lot of it could be like lost in translation or the weak signal line or whatever. But I kept asking, what is this reconversion? And he said, that's where you take the wisdom of the ancient people and you match it with your modern technology to put it all together, to reconvert to your to return to your ancient self, but with a modern twist. This idea plus the extraterrestrial technology that's been denied to us for 80 years, by certain agencies and the defense contractors and so forth. And he said that's what needs to occur. When we take this leap of consciousness, respect the ancient people for what they knew, like you said, way ahead of us. Well, and we've just forgotten it all.
yeah, right.
Paranormal abilities that are innate in all human beings, and all that. And if we put it together, then we're gonna reach this next level in our evolution, and we'll be ready. We'll be
So how do
ready
you
to
how do you think we're coming on that personally
well,
yourself?
there's it's very difficult because there's so much resistance. We just see well, like we get a snapshot in this country, but it's going on in other countries and in technological societies and ancient, where like the Aborigines already, maybe they don't have all the fancy, modern stuff, but they understand the connection.
I'm going to
And
stop you for a second.
yeah,
So I have Jazz Shaw on the show regularly. He's the UFO writer for Salem Media, and him
okay,
and we agree on almost everything. He's actually connected to the defense industry, so he hears all sorts of stuff. But the one little thing we haven't agreed on and that is, he says that the public is ready for quote unquote disclosure. And I said, I don't know about that. And my thinking is maybe Americans are, but the thing is, if you tell Americans, you're telling the entire world. And I don't know if the
Right.
world is. Basically just
Yeah.
touching on what you're talking about. I don't
Yeah.
know if that's true.
Well, we have to. I think what we need to do is we need to look at the difference between disclosure and what Ansar calls revelation. Disclosure is other directed. That's where you're being told what the truth is. Like we're sitting around waiting what the
Right.
government's going to tell us something, right? Revelation is where it comes from within. It's revealed from within naturally, and it's inner directed. And that's what Ansar is talking about. You could wait forever for disclosure. And disclosure, if somebody tells you what the truth is, you might say, "Oh, okay, yeah, what's next?" It's not coming from within. It's just like learning. It's like you try to memorize something for a test and then you forget it, or you internalize it. Like when I used to take notes on 3x5 cards and look in card catalogs and research in a library, that process of doing all that stuff internalized a lot of that information. Whereas now it's at people's fingertips, or just the whole world of information, but it's not sticking, it's not internalizing, it's external, and it's not coming from within, having that eureka moment when you, through all your hard work and perspiration, you figure out, oh, I get it. I get what's going on with this, historical event or whatever. I'm putting the pieces together, and I think that's what's missing. So I see your point. I think that much of the world is not ready. There's a great deal of resistance. I was just doing a podcast or a radio show last night, and the callers, a lot of them were talking about, religious aspects, saying, well, I think you might be talking to a demon, and I've heard this before. I've had criticism, I think you're being deceived. And I said, well, I've asked Anzar about that. I've thought about it, but I've been in contact with him, basically my whole life, but on a regular basis for the last 6 years. And and what he tells me every time is to be sure to keep love in your heart and always operate from a position of love. Now, a demon wouldn't say that. A demon wouldn't say that. And they might fake it and try to say it, but they're not going to continually say it and help me live up to that, because that is extremely hard to. It sounds so simple, but every decision you make, you're supposed to approach it from a position of love. I mean, that changes your whole perspective on the world. It doesn't mean you're a pushover, like, oh, I'll let anybody do anything, because I love everybody, whatever. No, there's tough love, as we know. When you have children,
Yeah.
understand what tough love is, or people you care about. You tell, yeah,
You're a college professor. I mean, this is my constant dilemma as a human being. On the one hand, I want to love everybody. On the other hand, I have to be highly critical of both myself and others to keep
yeah,
standards high. You're dealing with students.
yeah,
You have to simultaneously love them and kick them in the ass. And
yeah.
and and it's a very, very hard line to toe. It,
It's
it,
yeah.
I don't,
It
I
is.
don't even know if I know how to do it. I'm 68. I don't even know. I'm trying. You know.
I'm still learning. I'm still learning. I had an experience this morning with a student, very frustrating experience, a student who went directly to the college president about me adding them uh, to a class, a late start class. And they went directly to the college president, which caused a big commotion. The president contacted the dean contacted me, and I said, really? Wow, this person went right to the president's office. And then now they're bugging you, the dean, and now you're, come. And I got frustrated, and then I thought about it. This is a person who doesn't know how things work. They don't know about a chain of command. I was in the military. My brother was in Vietnam. My son is in the Air Force. My eldest son. My dad was in the Norwegian Navy. I grew up with this, chain of command thing. You try to follow the chain of command whenever you can, and unless it's an emergency. But this person was panicked, and the more I found out about the situation, the more my frustration went down, and I approached it from a position of love, and I added the person, And when the time is right, probably in about a week when they get their feet on the ground on the class, I'm going to say, hey, listen, uh, if that ever happens again, you're kind of lucky that I worked through the, I was a little bit upset the way you handled it. This is the way you should probably handle it next time. And maybe you just didn't know. And that's the tough love part of it. I'm not going to let him just think that he can, go to the highest person and cause a commotion and, and then you get what you want. I got to teach him a lesson too, even though I ultimately let him in the class and I'll work with him. But uh, as it turns out, he probably needs me. That's the way I look at it. He probably
Yeah,
needs me to teach him that lesson.
right.
And but it's hard. It's exhausting because
Yeah.
I got 7 classes I'm teaching with 45 students or 40 students in each class. And all of them, a lot of the young generation is kind of lost. Not to say that I wasn't at that age, but I think even more so now.
Well, I was
And
going to say that,
yeah.
Bruce. I mean, I talk about this on the show a lot, and I don't
Mhm.
want to put you on the spot, but I mean, I don't know about you. I look back on my youth. I was stupid as hell. But that said, these kids seem more stupid than we were. I
It,
mean, I'm being very blunt here, and
yeah.
I'm getting right to the point. But yeah, it's like, yeah, that's the way I don't know. There seems to be a coalescence of factors in society that have basically kind of kept them from either learning or being motivated to learn, one or the other. And I'm not just talking about facts and figures, of course.
And it comes down to what I usually say the first week of class. I'll say if you're here for me to help you feel safe, other than physical safety, like I'm not going to let anybody come in here and kill us. I'm going
Yeah.
to use every bit of strength I have and knowledge I have about the military and weapons to save us or help us and teach you how to do it at the moment too. But I'm saying if you're expecting me to never present any ideas that could upset you or that would be shocking to you, then you have to realize you got to grow up. I mean, this is, it's not going to be spoon fed to you. There's some terrible things that have happened in our history. There's some really wonderful things. And, I'm not going to hide anything from you. You can talk about whatever you want to talk about. I'll frame it in a historical way. But the idea that you're somehow going to have a safe space, that's a real disservice that I think somebody has planted into the minds of some young people. You got to go through some hard knocks to learn. I mean, otherwise you're not going to learn. The best learning that I've ever done is when I did not feel safe with the idea. It's like, wow,
Yeah.
that's alien to me. I'll use
Well,
the word
so
alien.
speaking of that, now
Yeah.
you at Citrus College, you actually taught a course on the paranormal for a while,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Yeah. Just before the pandemic. Yeah, I
And
did.
how did that go over?
It was very popular. I had the first class, I had 45 students, the same as my regular classes, and all ages too, from 18 to 80, and all different ethnicities, all different walks of life. I even had professors taking my class, people that I knew. I had some skeptics that wanted to take the class so they could say what BS it was. Frankly, that's what they were there for, to debunk the whole thing. And by the end of the class, 7 weeks later, a friend of mine who's a math professor, who was one of the skeptics, strong skeptics, by the end of the class was asking me, I think my cat who died 3 years ago is still living in the house. What do you think? And I said, that's great. That's great. You're having a
Oh
breakthrough
man,
here.
you just
And
amused me. That's all.
yeah, and I said, can there be animal spirits or is it just human spirit? I said, no, of course it could be any kind of living thing. And I said, that's wonderful. That's really wonderful. He said, I'm not going to buy all this other stuff, but I think that this might be something. I said, well, that's something. And
So tomorrow night, Bruce, I have Kathleen Martin on it.
oh
She's
yeah.
so I've been reading both of your latest books
Mhm.
simultaneously. I'm getting them constantly confused. Was it you or her that was talking about the fact that animals are telepathic? Because I've had in the last 35 years, I've had 9 cats, and I had 3 when I was growing up. I've had a dozen cats in my life. I don't
Mhm.
know if many people don't know this. Cats don't meow at each other. They only meow at humans.
Yeah.
They only verbalize to humans. And my theory is that they're telepathic with each other. That's what I think. And we're just we think we're the smart ones. We're the stupid oafs. They're talking with their brains, and we can't do it. That's my
It's
theory.
well, they're very, very smart, and they're wonderful animals. They're spirit animals for a
Yeah.
reason, And some of my experiences have involved some of the cats I've had, And I have a story in one of my timeless books. I call it Tiger the Magic Cat. And Tiger was one of my. I love all of my cats that I've had, and Tiger was the most special of all of them. I had him the longest, and he was he was very, very special. And I agree with you. Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting when I talk about war. Uh, I say, the difference between cats and dogs. Dogs will go to war with us. We have dogs in the military.
Yeah.
But cats won't. Cats
Yeah.
won't go to war with us.
No.
So it's because they know better.
That's
They.
right. That's correct. That's correct. So, you were talking, you alluded to this earlier. I mean, there's a lot of, and you're talking about your friend here about his cat. I'm
Yeah.
sure there's a lot of people listening to this right now who thinks you're crazy.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. So, but the thing is, and this is just a statement, so I'm curious to see what you have to think about this. There's more and more quote unquote crazy people like you talking about this stuff all the time. Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, and do you think this is part of the revel? You said it was a revelation?
Yeah, it is. It's part of the movement towards a leap of consciousness.
Yeah,
And all these people at the same time are starting, there was the timing of it, the gene comes to me in 2016, 2017, there's this, the revelation or the information comes out about this secret UFO program, that the government's been doing that with the in the New York Times, that was brought out, and it's just kind of built from there. But before that, in our history, we've had like just before the Civil War, we had a huge spiritualist movement. I mean, from the early 1800s to around the time of the Civil War, and it had a huge impact on society. And it's not surprising that in times of great stress and turmoil, that people turn towards their inner life, that who am I and why am I here? And not just in a perfunctory way, not just like, well, I go to church and I'm a good person and it's a social thing. And I'm not saying that organized religion is bad, but I'm just saying that people look for alternatives, or they look for something else, or a
yeah,
deeper meaning within that church. And I went to Sunday school, as we're part of the Norwegian Lutheran Church, and I value all that I learned, and I believe in God and all that, and I pray many times a day. But that doesn't discount the fact that I've had experiences with ghosts and aliens and everything else, telepathy and telekinesis and everything else. It's all real, or as my friend Gene likes to say, it's all true, Bruce. It's all true. And I said, well, what about that? What he said, hey, I'll save you the trouble. It's all true.
that's as a broadcaster, I call myself a conspiracy theorist because it seems like more and more of the conspiracies come true all the time. So, I do want to mention. Go ahead.
Right. No, that's right. If you look up the term conspiracy, I did that the other day. That every once in a while when I get, it's like I'm just accepting this term and people use it in a negative way. It's usually used in a negative way, especially by those in authority, that if they don't like you to look into something, they say, well, that's a conspiracy, that's a
Right.
conspiracy theory. But when you really look at it, they're turning it around. Hiding stuff is a conspiracy.
Yes, that's
trying
right. Absolutely.
to reveal the truth is not a conspiracy.
Yeah.
You're
You
revealing the conspiracy.
you talked in your book, you actually mentioned Sean Kirkpatrick and the Arrow program. You
Yes.
mentioned it
Yeah.
briefly. So here's my question to you. Do you think it's possible? And you kind of talked very disparagingly about the fact that he said, they didn't come up with anything and all that sort of rot. Do you think there's a possibility he truly didn't know?
I think it's hard to know because of national security. What these guys, some of them are trained. Well, they're not just trained; they're ordered to lie,
Yeah.
and they're told it's okay, uh, even though they're getting paid by taxpayer money and they're supposed to be honest, because national security is involved. So the national security state puts those people into a different uh, a different morality path, where they can lie but think very virtuously about it. It's
because
like
they think they justified in doing it.
yeah, the end justifies the means. The
Right.
fact that they're going to hide this technology, quote unquote technology, from our enemies. But as Anzar told me, he said that alien technology or star family technology and wisdom and our existence is not for the strategic advantage of the few. It's for all of us, and that's the way it's supposed to be used. That's why revelation from from the grassroots is so important, to put pressure on those in authority to then do their due diligence and just go ahead and tell us what's going on, because uh, it's time. And it's not just here in this. We get the theater going on here, but it's going on in other countries at the same time at different levels. And whether it's Russia or China. But it really comes down to this. This is what I understand. This is what Anzar has boiled it down to. He said there's a battle going on between those who want to control and those who want us to have free will. And the ETs are lined up. There's a faction for each. There's a faction of star people who think that the best way to deal with humans is to control them, carefully
Right.
control them.
Right.
And then there's Anzar and other faction who say the best way to deal with humans is to allow them to have free will, but also guidance. Guidance and free will, kind of like parenting styles.
Yeah.
There's the helicopter parent who will not
Mhm.
let their children do anything or learn make any mistakes, and are so they create these nervous Nellies. These people,
Right.
they're afraid to do anything. And of course, there's parents who don't care about their children, neglectful. But then there's parents who allow their children to make some mistakes. Allow them to have free will to venture on their own and learn some things. They're not going to let them kill themselves. They're going to obviously step in. And I think that's what we're seeing with a friend of mine. I'm sure maybe you've talked to him, Bob Salas. He was an Air Force officer at Malmstrom Air Force Base in 1969 when the nukes were shut down
Yeah.
after a UFO was over their base. And and I've asked Anzar about that, and he said, "Well, we're not going to allow you guys to destroy the planet, you
Right.
know, you know, but we're not going to stop you from having conventional war, because that's why it's, well, if you can do that, can't you just put a stop to all this killing and violence, and wouldn't it just be better?" And he said, "Well, we could do that, but if we do that, what have you learned? What you haven't learned, you learn that you can't control yourselves. So you
Yeah.
always have to be under control. And is that what you really want, is to be under control?" And there are some people that subscribe to that. There are an ET faction that says, no, they need to be controlled.
Matter of
And
fact,
you see it.
excuse me, was it your
Yeah.
book or Kathleen's? Did you call it a modified prime directive? Was that you?
No, that must have been her. But
Okay.
that's pretty cool. That is
Yeah.
pretty cool. That, because we're talking about the same things.
Yeah. Oh,
And,
yeah.
and I don't talk to her on a regular basis. I've never talked to her. Actually, I mean, I know who she is. I've read one of her earlier books, and I know she's a well-respected person. But I don't communicate with her. So it's interesting that we're coming from different perspectives, different experiences, but heading towards the same thing. And not just us, but many others
Well, I
as
was going
well.
to say, Bruce, I don't have to tell you this. You're talking about the struggle for control among the
Mhm.
ETs. You're not the only person saying this. I mean, this is at this point, it's almost like common lore in this sort of
Yeah.
world. That
Yeah.
there's various factors. And the other thing I'm constantly reminding my viewers of is the fact that the universe is teeming with life, and you got
Mhm.
people coming here. I'm going to call them people just for just lack
Yeah,
of a better
sure.
term. You got people coming here who are anywhere from 200 to 100,000 years ahead of us. It's
Mhm.
like, remember Star Trek Enterprise, first ship that went faster than the speed of light. I'm sure there's somebody coming here. They're 40 years out of it. And they're just coming here, and they're barely more, barely more than we do. And then
Mhm.
you have guys like Anzar, who
Mhm.
are like maybe hundreds of thousands of years ahead of us. There's all these people are living in the galaxy, and they're all coming
Mhm.
here. And
Yeah.
I have friends, of course, who who try to be very supportive of me doing what I'm doing here, but just like your
Mhm.
friend with the cats, they
Mhm.
just think I'm fucking nuts.
Yeah. And that's okay. I had somebody, I was on a show and somebody called in and they said, is it possible you're just imagining all this and you're really just insane? And I said, well, if I am crazy, I'm a very highly functional crazy
That's
person.
right.
How about
You
that?
are.
All the
Right.
things that I've done, not to toot my own horn, but I've done a lot of stuff and I've been, surviving in this world day to
And the
day.
college is
How
still paying you and you still have
I'm
students.
still, and
Yeah.
I do credit my wife Ginger. My wife Ginger is very practical minded, and it's great because I'll tell her, "Hey, I just had this great conversation with Anzar, and this is going on, and this, the intergalactic stuff," and she'll go, "Okay, that's great, but can you help me? I got to move this stuff, and I got to dig a hole, and I got to do all." It's like
That's exactly what I got going on too.
she's right. She's right. I can't live like that all the time. I got to get down to earth and I got to do the stuff I got to do and pay the bills and do all that stuff. And it's cool that I have this other stuff that I can do, but I have to, do all of that. And I don't know what it'd be like if I was married to somebody that is also talking to somebody like Anzar and we're just talking about all this stuff all the time. I don't know what that would be like. That
Well,
would
are
be
you familiar with the story of Paul Benowitz? You know, about the guy.
no,
He
no.
ran he basically got sucked into the UFO world and
Hmm.
basically kind of lost himself. It
Oh,
ended up
okay.
he went insane basically.
Yeah.
Just exactly you're talking about. There's no grounding. Uh, and he
Yeah.
lived what he lived next door to some Air Force base, and he said he figured out that
Oh.
they were being communicated to with by ETs, and he
Mhm.
called them and told them, and then they sent a disinformation officer over to basically mess him up, and
Oh, yeah.
they succeeded, and he lost his. Well, he ended up dying. It killed him. It's like,
Yeah.
but it's the extreme of exactly what you're talking about. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of people who basically go off the deep end thinking about this stuff. You know,
I w I was just I do know that story, and there's a CIA guy who was involved with that, and I heard him speak somewhere, and
Richard
anyway.
Doty, yeah,
Yeah, Richard Doty, yeah. So, but what that reminds me of is I had a friend of mine who was a psychiatrist, and I said to him, I said, "Have you ever thought about the fact that maybe some of the schizophrenics and people that you deal with that are really insane, is it possible that they're just really, really psychic and they don't know how to deal with it? That they really do see
yeah.
entities and they have all these experiences and you're looking at it from the outside thinking, oh well, I got to prescribe this guy some, whatever." And he looked at me with very seriously and sadly and he said, that's a horrible thought, that could be a possibility. And I told him, I said, I can give you copies of my books, if you want to know what I've gone through in my life. And he goes, okay. And I did give them to him. And then now I haven't seen him in a long time. I don't know what happened to him, but maybe he gave up the business. I don't know what's happened to him. But yeah, that was something he had not thought about to that point because he was so focused on the materialist science of it, which is great, but there's also this other part of it too,
Well,
and the
that's actually
convergence.
once again you got the duality that's going on here. Hard science is important, and people need
Yeah.
verification, all that sort of stuff. But it's occurred to me that when it comes to this world, maybe science is not the paradigm that should be used. Maybe I hate to say this, criminality. In other words, okay, so people are trying to prove that the ETs are here, right? Maybe
Mhm.
you don't look at it from a scientific point of view where you need, third party verification. Maybe you look at it from the terms of a criminal trial. You got
Mhm.
civil and criminal court. Criminal court, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. Civil court, it's a preponderance of evidence. And I
Right.
see a preponderance of evidence. I mean,
Yes,
there's like,
exactly.
it's so, well, now some people say that isn't proof. I think that's proof myself. So,
Yes.
but so maybe I mean, it's the duality of having to look at it scientifically and I don't, for lack of a better term, socially. I don't know, you know.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And I remind people because I'm a historian, the whole basis of history is oral history, people's experiences. Like I get back to the roots and I tell my students the first week, I say, when we say America went to war, America didn't go to war. Individual Americans went to war, and they had experiences, and they talk about their experiences, and that gets woven into our history. So individual people are having experiences with ETs or with UFOs, and it's being rejected by those in authority. And I think there's a reason why they're doing that. But if you noticed in these hearings, they haven't had experiencers there, people who have been abducted.
That's
They're just
true.
they're still poo-pooing those people. Part of that is because I think it opens a whole Pandora's box of liability, of serious liability, because once they reveal that, well, there's a couple of things. If they reveal that for 80 years, we've held on to this technology, trying to reverse engineer it, trying to figure out how to weaponize it, which is basically what they've been doing. And that it's been hurting people, that people have been hurt, that they've allowed this to happen. They knew it was happening. And then what happens when a million people in the United States or millions of people around the world come forward and say, wait a second, you knew this the whole time? And, this happened to my uncle, this happened to my aunt, it's happened to our whole family, and, you talk about litigation. Can you imagine
Oh
the
yeah.
commercials on TV? You hear all the time about mesothelioma, which is horrible, what
Yeah.
happened to Navy guys. Can you hear about that? Were you abducted? Call so-and-so's office and we will have a class action lawsuit again, whatever.
No,
I
we're
mean,
one step away from that right now. I mean,
yeah.
it's terrible. This is my thing in the criminality of this whole thing.
Mhm.
And first of all, I'm assuming you know this. There's a lot of people in the government that they don't want the quote unquote disclosure simply because it will make them legally liable.
Yeah.
You're talking about if you're going to follow the letter of the law, thousands of people go to jail. So
Yeah.
that's part of it. But
Yeah.
um, what was I gonna say, Bruce?
Oh, the idea of the experiencers and their, the possibility of,
Oh, right. So
the
this is what I'm
government
going to
hiding.
say. This is the part that I think is truly criminal about this. If you have this technology, which we do somewhere in some defense contractors,
Mhm.
hangar somewhere, So if you have it, you have to have an enormous amount of power to drive it. And if they
Yeah.
figured that out, and Richard Dolan talks about this regularly.
Yeah.
If they figured that out, that power could power the whole planet easily.
Exactly.
It would
Exactly.
basically solve all of our earthly problems. And the
Yes,
fact that they will not let this out is criminal.
it
That's
is.
where Dolan comes from, and that's my point too. I don't per se, they can keep it secret, and that's fine. But that one particular issue, that's awful. That's disgusting.
It is. It is. And I'd also add to that the fact that the only way to pilot these UAP, I still like to call them UFOs. UAP,
So
it's
do I. I
ridiculous.
do too. Right.
UFOs, the only way to pilot those things, and I've had a download from Anzar and actually a vision, where I was inside of one, and the only way to control those things is with your mind. You have
Yeah.
to be telepathic to do it. And so if the government says, yes, UAPs are real, yes, aliens are real, they're going to have to say, well, the only way, well, then somebody will say, well, why don't you just fly these things around? Because you have to be extremely psychic to be able to operate them. Because as it was in the vision that I had, I was kind of like read in, if you will, to use, intelligence terminology, about how these things work. And in the vision that I had while I was inside of a craft, the briefing officer said when we got inside and he put this thing into the middle of like a hole in the middle of the floor, the whole thing comes alive. And he said, like in the Frankenstein movie, he said, it's alive.
Yeah.
And he said, that's how it works. It's alive. It's integrated. There's that word integrated again. It's integrated with the pilot. And that's how you maneuver the thing. And that's why it can do all the things that it does as it breaks through space time. And so the idea that the government would then have to say, well, telepathy is real, psychokinesis is real, everything, basically what Gene said, it's all true, right? They
Yeah.
have to admit all that stuff. And then all of a sudden you got people, you mean I'm telepathic? Oh, well, maybe I'll start accepting that. And then everybody's reading everybody else's intentions, and then they're moving things with their minds and, chaos could break out. I
That's
mean,
true.
they know that there's no discipline involved. Like all the things I've learned about all this, the one thing I've learned is how to control it and turn it off. That's the most important thing, because you can teach people to do telekinesis or psychokinesis, PK, but they have to have an innate sense of responsibility, because with that power comes responsibility. And it's like the whole thing with traditional magic and black magic and stuff. Is all that stuff true? Well, yes, it is true, but there's a price to be paid. There's hell to be paid, if you will, if you do things that are harmful and do things against other people's wills. Because the old saying is, if you do something like that, it's going to come back on you 3 times. And I would say at least 3 times. So the knowledge that you can have to do this stuff needs to come with responsibility, and that's why you need that that leap of consciousness and the understanding that we're all together and we have to work together, and we have to keep love in our hearts. Otherwise, the whole thing is just going to we're not ready then. We're
Well, the
not
thing
ready.
is, yeah, maybe we aren't ready. I don't know.
I
I just
don't, as a society, we're not ready. I mean, we can see
well,
what's happening just in our own country, and I know people want to know the truth. I want everybody to know the truth, and I'm not saying I know everything. Obviously, I mean, I'm not like that. I'm just saying I have a couple pieces of the puzzle, and
yeah,
you have pieces of the puzzle, and other people do. And if we got to put them all together and try to figure it out, and I mean, that's all we can do, because
yeah.
we can't. It's humbling, because I'll tell you a funny story. I a couple years ago, after a bunch of stuff, I learned a lot from Anzar, and I went outside at night, and I like to look at the stars like a lot of us do. And I was looking up, and I go, I'm really starting to understand this. I'm really getting it. And then I heard Anzar's voice. I wasn't trying to connect to him, but he just thought he would chime in. He said, Bruce, you have no idea. It's like, okay, buddy, you think you
Yeah,
know
you're
about
an
this
idiot.
stuff. Yeah, you're an idiot. Yeah. Okay, rookie.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right, right. That's right. Well, that's the old saying, a little knowledge is dangerous,
it
so,
is. It
you
can be
know.
very much so. Yeah.
Yeah, Bruce, I think we'll leave it at that. You and I have been
Yeah.
talking for quite a while. I don't know if you know that. So,
Oh, oh my gosh. Yeah, I guess so.
yeah.
That was fun.
Okay,
It was
though.
fun.
That
Thank you.
was a lot of fun. I hope you'll come back.
Yes.
And we'll put a link up to your book, your book and your stuff on our blog, on the show blog
Okay.
at Gemini.com. We'll link to all your books on Amazon. Man, you've written a lot of stuff. It's like pretty cool.
Yeah, I've written 5 paranormal/UFO books now since 2017. So I've been busy, and I've been publishing comics too. I
Yeah, I
put my
saw that.
I put my message out through comics as well, because I feel like that's important
What's
to
you had a ET character? What's the name of the comic? I can't remember.
snark.
Snark. Yeah.
Yeah, a snark. And I actually came up with that while I was in the army in Germany in 1981. And I started formulating the idea. And I actually did a comic strip called Snark when I was in engineering school at Montana Tech in 1982. So it took, 37 years or whatever to actually publish it, before I finally came out with the comic book. So
Well, you're
it's
gonna
one of
live
my
forever.
it's one of my proudest accomplishments, is
Oh,
publishing a
really?
comic book. I'm
That's
about to
cool.
go to a Comic-Con next, a small one in Lompoc, which is right on the gates of Vandenberg Air Force Base, which is a really cool place where
Yeah.
they, it's a very secretive base, but we're going there next, not this weekend, but the next weekend after that. And we were there last year as well. And I also went to VandyCon, which is a Comic-Con on Vandenberg Air Force Base, and I was able to get on because I'm a veteran. So I have a card that gets me onto any base, or any post
You mind
as
if
a
I ask,
veteran.
does your wife come with you on these things?
Yes, she
That's
loves it.
cool. That's
She's very
great.
helpful and very, and because I know it seems like I'm just talking and talking, but when I go to these Comic Cons, I always find it hard to like go out there and, like, as people are walking by, hey, come buy my comics.
Yeah.
I don't know, when people come to me, oh, I'll talk to them all day long, but like trying to cold call people like a sales thing,
I'm
but
terrible at it. Awful.
but
I
but
can't do it either.
But luckily, my wife, and especially her sister, who loves to come, she is like a carnival barker. She's out there. Hey, come
Oh,
here.
that's
Come on in.
fantastic.
What are you doing, buddy? Slow down. Come here. You got to talk to this guy. He
That's
created this
good.
comic. Can you believe that? And I'm going, yeah, that's me. I've created this guy.
Well, distribution of labor there. That's pretty good, you know?
It's fun. It's a family thing. It's a lot of fun.
That's great. That's fantastic. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this. So
It's
we got to do this
very
again.
I'm really glad that I looked you up after my friend Bruce, another Bruce, the scientist Bruce, was on your show, and then I decided, yeah, I'm going to get a hold of you, and then I thought, yeah, we would have a good conversation. So I really appreciate it. Thank you very
Oh,
much,
no,
Jim.
my pleasure. My true pleasure. And we'll have you on. And I love talking to Bruce Rapalano too. Yeah, we
Yeah,
had a great conversation with him too. Lot,
yeah, he's a
I'm
cool
sorry.
guy.
He's a
Yeah,
very
he's a
cool
cool
guy.
guy.
And you
Yeah.
are too. Yeah,
Oh,
thank you.
thank you, and
Thanks.
you are too. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying.
All
So
right.
you take care, all right?
You too. We'll see you.
We'll see you. Bye-bye. That's Bruce Solheim. He's the author of We Are the Aliens. Like he said, he's written 5 books on alien and paranormal stuff, and he's written about another like 4 or 5 books on other stuff. Um, so it's hard to talk to somebody like that. Now, if you're watching this and you're thinking, well, this guy's fucking nuts, he's pretty damn accomplished for somebody who's nuts. And that's actually was one of my points I brought up there. There's a lot of people who are all of a sudden talking about the stuff they've experienced this stuff. And most of these people, not all of them, but most of them, many of them are really c- highly respected contributing citizens, I don't think you could not say that about him. So, and he was talking about his friend Bruce Rapalano, and he was on here a couple weeks ago. Also, another really great guy. Tomorrow we have on Kathleen Martin. I mean, she's like UFO royalty almost. So, it'll be. I'm sure we'll talk to her for at least an hour. And that's actually kind of my point here. We're an hour 41 minutes into this. Our shows are getting longer and longer all the time. I guess that's not a bad thing. I'm sitting here bitching and moaning about Joe Rogan and his 3-hour interviews. Well, okay, we're not even doing 2-hour interviews. It's like I kind of refuse. But our shows are getting longer and longer. I mean, we've been doing more than 2-hour shows, or we've been doing more 2-hour shows, and we are not cleared with our distributors to go over 2 hours. So, I mean, we've been bumping up the limit here several times. So I'm gonna end with this because this is our part 3 here. That we and part 3 is usually paranormal stuff, but we already had about an hour of that. So, but I guess this is paranormal. Part 3 is, or what was actually called in the broadcasting world, the C block, but but I call it part 3 because that's what I started writing on the rundowns, and the hell with it. It's part 3 now. Is basically just weird shit, and this is what I got for weird shit because I got. I'm gonna hold a couple of these things over for tomorrow night because we're going a little late here. But this is when I promo this in the description for the show on our distributors. So the deal is a guy in Oklahoma went fishing with his friend, and they're in a canoe, and I can't remember what river they're on. They're in Oklahoma, and the guy sees 3 Bigfoot on the shore, and somehow, apparently because he's not particularly stable, so we don't even know if he saw the Bigfoot, but this is what he says. He saw the 3 Bigfoot, and he determined that his friend who was in the canoe with him was setting him up, that his friend was going to kill him to feed him to the Bigfoot. So he killed his friend. What a great way to go. Jesus Christ. So you got a guy, and the police have described him as quote unquote unstable. No shit. But but anyway, so you got a guy, but we don't. So he says he saw 3 Bigfoot on the shore. We have no idea if he actually did or not because he's not exactly what you would call a reliable witness. But anyway, there's a guy dead because of this, and I'm laughing, but that's actually terrible. But it's sad. Yeah, so there's our part 3 for tonight. We'll have more tomorrow. Okay, Kathleen Martin joining us tomorrow, Thursday, on the 25th. We take Fridays off here. We don't do a show on Friday. Next Monday, we got the month in review panel, which is Larry Newman, who is Larry Newman. Well, I'm not kidding. If you've never seen their show before, Larry Newman is a certified Bigfoot investigator. He works for the Bigfoot Field Research Organization. He's a police detective by training, which is the reason they recruited him. And he said he was highly skeptical. He didn't believe in Bigfoot at all until he's in the middle of the Ozarks in the forest in the middle of the night. And he said he watched a family of Bigfoot, mama, papa, baby Bigfoot, through an infrared camera for an hour. Pitch dark, couldn't see anything with your naked eye, but through the camera, he said they watched a Bigfoot family, and he said that convinced him. So yeah, Larry's coming on Monday, and then Tim Conaway, former presidential candidate. Tim's claim to fame is that he was the executive editor of Hustler magazine during the 80s and 90s, during the height of its existence. And he also went on to edit about a dozen other magazines too. He spent his entire career in magazine journalism. And Don Zorro, who's an intelligence operative, who comes on in mask because we cannot reveal his identity. So I say I think he just goes over to the Middle East and makes love to women. That's what I say. But anyway, that's the panel for Monday. So I want to thank you for watching. Good night, Esperanza. Good night, Uncle Donnie, and good night to you wherever you are. We'll see you tomorrow night with Kathleen Martin. Take care.